And talking about that, so what's going to happen now in the Middle East? It seems Iran is retaliating now officially, sending different missiles and bombs but this is what Netanyahu wants, isn't it? Netanyahu is another figure
Yeah.
like that fight until the end or
Yes,
something.
he is going to fight until the end. It's exactly the same mentality. Can I just say, I did my own program for my earlier today, and I made a point, which is that all of this reminds me terribly of the war in Ukraine. In that situation, you had a, you had a whole pattern of actions going all the way back to the original decision to invite Ukraine to join NATO in 2008, where the West seemed to want to go out of its way to provoke Russia into a war it didn't want. And eventually they succeeded. They just went on piling one provocation on top of the other until, of course, they got the war they wanted. And it seems to me this is exactly what's playing out in the Middle East now. Instead of in place of Russia, it's Iran. Iran clearly didn't want a war. They accepted. They took on. They absorbed the fact that Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran. They avoided acting after Israel started bombing and attacking Hezbollah. Eventually, we got to the point where not just Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, who's a friend of many members of the Iranian leadership, was killed, but apparently a senior Iranian general was killed. And the point came when the Iranians had to say to themselves, look, if we simply go on sitting back and doing this, we will put ourselves in an impossibly weak position. No one will take us seriously. And far from averting a war, we will end up in a war because these people clearly want a war with us, but one in which we have no allies. So they had to take this action. I think they were forced into it. They didn't want to do it, but that's where we are. And by the way, going back to our earlier discussion, you see the same pattern with China as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Constant provocations, one on top of the other, goading China into doing something which China absolutely doesn't want to do, as it has repeatedly shown. And, anyway, we see that China is still to come. Now in the Middle East, we are in the situation where we forced, and I say we because I'm a Westerner, we have forced Iran into this kind of missile strike that it didn't want. And what are we doing? Well, we are absolutely euphoric about it. You read the media here, they're in absolute joy because now they can launch their further strike against Iran. They're already picking targets. They're saying, let's go after Iran's oil facilities and nuclear installations, and let's try and assassinate its leaders. And, well, this is the high road to disaster. Of that, I am sure.
Yeah, and and I thought it was Netanyahu who really want to pull the US in. So he's doing all these things by himself, and
Yeah.
US may or may not be really very happy about that. Until I read this political article saying US officials quietly backed Israel's military push against Hezbollah.
Yeah.
So in there, it says the senior White House figures privately told Israel that the US would support its decision to ramp up military pressure against Hezbollah, even as the Biden administration publicly urged the Israel government in recent weeks to curtail its strikes. So essentially, and apparently, according to that article, apparently even people in the State Department, the Pentagon, and the CIA are skeptical about this whole thing. But Biden administration just go ahead with it,
Yeah.
basically telling Israel, go ahead. Even though they're saying, oh, these de-escalation, de-escalation. This is outrageous. When I was reading this article, I mean, it's not just the Israel. Apparently, Biden administration wants this too.
Yeah. Well, what does it? Does it not remind you what Wang Yi said to Blinken?
Exactly.
Two-faced. Isn't this
Yeah.
being absolutely two-faced? And of course, it's two-faced, wanting a war in the Middle East when your own your own people, the people in the military, the intelligence people, they're telling you you're going to lose. But,
Yeah.
you just keep going. You ignore the experts. You press forward. And as I said, if you read the media here, um, not all of the media. I mean, the Guardian is much more skeptical about this. The Financial Times is a bit nervous, but if you go to places like the Telegraph, the Times, those places, they're in an exalted mood because they're about to get that war with Iran that they yearn for, convinced that it's going to be an easy win, just as they were convinced that the sanctions were going to destroy the Russian economy, just as they were convinced before that, once they occupied Iraq, it would turn into a stable, peaceful country that they would in effect control. Just as they said the same about Libya. They always assume that it'll always be easy, that resistance will collapse, that there will be no problems. They never plan or think it through or prepare for the possibility that it might actually turn against them in the end. But there we are. That's where we are. That is, I mean, going back to your point about the fact that the people who run things in the West are incredibly dangerous. This shows you how dangerous they are. Two-faced,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
lie, they lie, they lie all the time, and looking for every opportunity to start another war.
yeah. Pompeo said that.
When I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
And then in the meantime, I not just last week, I think the U.S. also sent more troops and weapons into the Middle East. So it seems to me that Biden no longer cares about election. I mean, I guess it's not his election anymore. So whatever happens, the whole Middle East blow up, he will be fine with it. He doesn't care about elections. Is that what his mentality is now, right now?
Well, I think there's also a desire in Washington, in the White House specifically, to get all of these wars going before the new president comes in, so that the new president is stuck with the wars. I think that this is partly what this is all about. They look at Donald Trump, who's of course very, very, very pro-Israel and no friend of China's, if I can put it like that. But nonetheless, he has always talked about the fact that he doesn't want wars. So they look at Donald Trump, so they want to get the wars all going before he comes in. And they look at Kamala Harris, and one senses that she's, despite the fact that she's very close to Biden and part of the administration, that she's not really as signed up to all of this as some of the people there are. So they want to sort of box her in as well. And I think that's partly what it's about now. I mean, they've got a window until the end of January, so they're going to use it to promote war as much as they can.
Well, but this war, I think, I mean, they have to pay attention to, I mean, they always pay attention to their allies, right? They always like to say coalition, blah, blah, they're, our allies, blah, blah. Now, in this case, Macron, even in France, already says France stands by Lebanon and calls for de-escalation. And Italy also says they're ready to send troops to UN for a Palestinian state, etc. Seems to me like this one, I'm not sure how many of their allies will be even behind it. It will be more or less the U.S. alone, then, wouldn't you say?
It will be the U.S. alone. I mean, European opinion, and I don't just mean governments. In fact, governments are the least of it. European public opinion will absolutely not want European soldiers involved in a long war in the Middle East. Anybody who thinks that is, again, being delusional, just as they do not want a war with Russia either. So you're absolutely correct. It will be a coalition of one, the United States. There won't be many. I mean, right, they'll find small countries. I mean, Armenia or someplace like that, or one of these Micronesian states. They'll probably join. But I mean, fundament Argentina under President Milei or something of that kind. But overall, each one of these coalitions of the willing becomes smaller with each iteration.